I should have fixed that damn window latch months ago. Every gust of wind through it reminds me I never finish things. I was trying to read, pretending I wasn't waiting for her to text back, when it popped again. That sharp clack of wood tapping frame, just once. That's when I threw the book. It hit the floor with that cheap paperback sound, and I just sat there, staring at nothing. I don't know how long. My hands were shaking, not from cold, not even from the noise. I think it was because I realized I was still waiting for my father to call me. And he's been dead for 6 years. That was the thought. That's how it started. I don't even like the man. Or maybe I do. I never really sorted that out. But that moment, something cracked open. I wasn't thinking about the woman who ghosted me or the job I got laid off from or the fact that I've been eating frozen dinners for 8 straight nights. It was just my father, and this tight, sour guilt that I never visited him the last month of hospice. I didn't cry. I got up, found the duct tape in the kitchen drawer, and sealed that window shut. But as I sat back down, I realized I'd done that before. Same tape, same drawer. I just peeled it off a few weeks ago, hoping I'd finally repair it properly. I've been retaping the same problems for years. That's when I looked over at the coat closet. I hadn't opened it since the move. I knew what was in there, the one box I packed last. Shoved it in behind my winter boots, told myself I'd deal with it later. His things. A badge. Letters. The day he stopped breathing, I packed up what they let me keep. I'd never looked at it since. Until tonight. I opened it. The smell came first. Something old, sour with dust and aftershave. Then the photos. Him in uniform laughing in one. That laugh that always seemed like a trick. He never laughed at home. The badge was there, dulled at the edges. And then, beneath the rest, I found a notebook. The last one he ever kept. His handwriting. God, I hated how neat it was. The first page was a list. My name was on it. Just once. No explanation. No context. Just, Adam, 1989. I would have been 8. My chest got tight. I flipped to the next page. Nothing. Just a date. And then more pages with dates and lines scratched through them. No full sentences. Just fragments. Didn't speak again. Quiet in the hall. Didn't knock. Hands clenched again. Woke up from dream. Screaming his name. All dated. All around the time Mom left. The last page had only 2 words. Forgive him. I dropped the book. I sat on the floor for over an hour. And for the first time in years, I said his name out loud. Dad. I spent the next morning standing in my hallway, staring at the doorframe where he used to measure my height. The pencil marks are still there, barely visible under 2 coats of paint, but I can trace them with my thumb. June 1993, September 1994. I must have grown 3 inches that year. He always made me stand straight. He never smiled when he marked it. Just that flat look, like he was checking a number on a form. Stand still, Adam, he'd say, then scratch the pencil in like he was carving a wound. I used to think those marks meant he was proud of me. Now I'm not sure they meant anything to him at all. But there they are, still here even after he's gone. The only evidence I ever existed in that house as a kid, at least on his terms. I left the notebook open on the kitchen table. I hadn't touched it since the night before. I just kept pacing between the doorframe and the fridge, reading fragments of those jotted thoughts. It didn't feel like a journal. It felt like surveillance, like he'd been studying me, not raising me. One line stopped me cold. Threw toy. Said he hated me. Stayed outside till dark. I remember that day. I'd wanted to go with Mom. I begged her, crying in the driveway. She told me it wasn't that simple. Dad stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I threw my toy truck at him when she pulled away. It hit the steps. He didn't flinch. I stayed in the yard until I couldn't feel my fingers. Reading that line, it wasn't the memory that hurt. It was knowing he wrote it down like a scientist logging a lab test. No reaction. No emotion. Just facts. I started to wonder, was that notebook for him or for someone else? I went to the garage, dug out the last of his boxes I hadn't thrown away. Files, manuals, old receipts. But then I found it. A smaller box, taped twice over, labeled a 2001 to 2005. My initials, my high school years. Inside there were clippings, newspaper printouts, photos, my debate trophies, even the program from my graduation, circled in red ink. He'd kept it all. Nothing about those years ever came out of his mouth. But here it was, organized, cataloged like evidence of someone he didn't know how to love out loud. I don't know how long I stood there holding that program. Maybe an hour. And I didn't know if I was angry at him for never telling me or at myself for needing him to. But I started to see the pattern. A man who couldn't speak, so he wrote. A man who couldn't ask for forgiveness, so he left it in a notebook. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it wasn't nothing. I walked back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and picked up the pen I hadn't used in years. I turned to the last page of his notebook. Right under forgive him, I wrote. Still thinking about it. I drove 6 streets out of my way to avoid the house I grew up in. I hadn't planned on it, I was just heading toward the grocery store, but when I saw the sign for Oakmere Avenue, my stomach turned like I was passing the scene of a crash. I didn't want to see the porch, the cracked brick walkway, the gutter he never fixed. I didn't want to see it and wonder if the pencil marks were still on the wall inside or if some stranger painted over them without a second thought. So I turned off, made a loop, hit a dead end, then kept driving. For 30 minutes I circled the old neighborhood, engine idling through memories I hadn't asked for. Each corner brought a new flicker, the bus stop where I once begged to be picked up early. The park where he stood silent while I cried after losing a baseball game. The gas station where I'd wait in the back seat while he smoked in silence. By the time I parked at the store, I wasn't sure what I'd come for. I wandered the aisles aimlessly, holding a basket I never filled. At the freezer section, I stopped in front of the TV dinners. I always bought the same ones, Salisbury steak or meatloaf. I stared at them too long. It wasn't the food. It was the memory of him in his recliner, tray on his lap, eating that same rectangle of mashed potatoes night after she left. I never saw him cook. Not once. He fed me, sure, I never went hungry. But there was no warmth in it. Just process. Heat, serve, clean. I didn't even know what his favorite meal was. That hit me hard, standing there with the cold air blowing in my face. I left the basket on the floor and walked out without buying anything. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, forehead against the wheel, feeling a pressure behind my eyes that wouldn't become tears. That's when I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in a decade. I looked up my mother. She lived 3 states away now. Still had her maiden name. There was an address. A phone number. No photos. I saved the number but didn't call. Just stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought of all the things I'd say if I called. All the questions I'd ask. Why didn't you take me? Why didn't you come back? Did you know what he was like after you left? But I didn't dial. Because the truth was she left, but he stayed. He didn't say the right things. Hell, he barely said anything. But he showed up. Every damn day in his silent, broken way. And now all I could feel was the weight of that. The weight of what I didn't understand until he was gone. I started the engine and drove home in silence. No music. No distractions. When I got back, I opened the notebook again. On a fresh page, I wrote. He stayed. I waited 3 days before I opened the last box. It had always sat there, under the stairs in the corner, behind the busted lamp and the broken snow shovel I kept meaning to throw out. I knew what was in it. Or I thought I did. Old paperwork. Maybe his pension letters. Tax returns. That's what I told myself every time I walked past it. But something in me had shifted since reading the notebook. Since writing in it. I didn't want answers. Not really. I just wanted to stop avoiding the questions. So I opened it. There was a manila folder on top marked letters not sent. I pulled it out and sat down on the concrete floor, cross-legged like a kid. The first envelope was addressed to me. No stamp. No date. Just my name, written in his stiff, engineer's handwriting. I almost didn't open it. But I did. Inside was a single page folded cleanly. Adam, I'm not good at this. I guess you know that. You were 9 when she left. You didn't understand and I didn't explain. I should have. I thought showing up was enough. I thought if I kept the lights on and the fridge full, you'd know I loved you. But I know now that silence isn't neutral, it hurts just the same. I watched you grow up from the next room. Watched you try to make sense of a father who didn't talk, didn't hug, didn't ask. And I hated that I didn't know how to fix it. You were always better than me. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I hope you have a life. A good one. And I hope you know I never stopped trying even when it didn't look like it. Dad, I read it twice. The first time I didn't breathe. The second time I cried. Not the kind of cry you see in movies, no heaving, no collapse to the floor. Just quiet tears. Like a leak in a wall that had held too long. There were other letters. One to my mother. One to someone named Alan, his brother, I think, whom I'd only met once at a funeral. And one to no one. Just pages of thoughts, as if he had started to talk to himself when no one else would listen. I stayed there in the basement for hours. When I came back up, it was nearly dark. I made a real dinner, eggs and toast. Simple, but something hot I actually cooked. I sat at the table and ate it slow, without the TV on. Then I opened his notebook again. Beneath where I'd written he stayed, I added. He tried. And for the first time in a long time, I slept the whole night through. The voicemail had been sitting on my phone for 4 years. I kept it without meaning to. One of those accidental preservations, new phone, data transfer, never deleted. I knew it was there. I'd seen it every time I scrolled through the messages. Dad, May 11th, 2019. I never played it. I assumed it was short. Probably him asking about the electric bill or something equally dry and practical. That night, after the letter, after the eggs and toast, I pressed play. Adam. Hey. Just wanted to. I was thinking. It's your birthday coming up. 38, right? You were born at 2:14 a.m. I remember the clock. The nurse had red hair. I passed out in the hallway. Funny, huh? I know we haven't talked much lately. I probably don't say things the way you'd like. But I'm proud of you. Even if you don't call back, I just wanted to say that. Okay, that's all. I listened to it 3 times. The voice didn't sound like the man I remembered. It was unsure, worn down, human. He wasn't the badge or the belt or the silence. He was a man leaving a voicemail to a son he knew he was losing. And I hadn't called him back. I sat there with that in my chest, heavy like gravel. All the years I'd blamed him for not reaching out, and here was his voice, crossing a chasm I'd never acknowledged. It wasn't polished. It wasn't enough. But it was real. There are things you can't take back. Missed birthdays. Unanswered calls. The way you roll your eyes at someone trying in the only way they know how. I called his number. It disconnected immediately. No voicemail. No echo. I sat in the dark, phone in hand, until the silence stopped feeling hostile. The next morning, I went to the cemetery. It wasn't planned. I just woke up, got dressed, and drove. I had to use Google Maps. I hadn't been since the funeral. The grass was short, still damp from last night's rain. I didn't bring flowers. That didn't feel honest. I brought the notebook. His stone was modest. No quote. Just his name, the badge number, the dates. I read from the notebook, the page where he wrote, "Forgive him." Then the one I added, "Still thinking about it." And finally, he tried. I said those words out loud. I didn't care if anyone heard. I just needed them to leave my mouth. Then I spoke the rest, not like a speech, not like a eulogy. Just a quiet ramble. Memories. Regrets. The things I wanted him to say, and the things I wished I'd said before it was too late. I stayed until the sky dimmed. Then I left the notebook at the base of the headstone, weighed down with a small rock. Let it stay there. Let the rain take it, or the wind. I didn't need it anymore. The last thing I said before walking away was, "I'm not him. But I understand him now." After the cemetery, the quiet didn't scare me like it used to. I started noticing things. The way the floor creaked under my left foot when I walked into the kitchen. How the fridge made a soft hum right before kicking on. The tick of the old wall clock, loudest at 2 a.m. when everything else dropped away. None of it had changed. I stopped filling the space with noise. No TV droning just to drown out thought. No podcasts in the shower. I started listening. And somewhere in that silence, I heard my own voice again, not the one I used with coworkers or friends, the tight, easy mask of sarcasm and one-liners, but the one I hadn't used since I was a boy in his bedroom talking to the dark. I remembered how I used to talk to God back when I believed he was paying attention. It wasn't prayer. More like bargaining. If I get through this test, I'll stop lying. If she comes back, I'll be better. If he hugs me first, I'll stop being scared of him. That boy never got what he asked for. But he kept whispering. And I realized I hadn't whispered in years. So I started again. Not to God. Not exactly. Just into the room. I'd say things out loud. Like I was explaining myself to the air. One night I said, I miss you even though I hated parts of you. Another night, I'm scared I'll end up like you. Then maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. It felt stupid at first. But then it felt like breathing. I dug out an old cassette recorder from a bin in the closet. The kind he used to use for interviews, cheap, brown plastic with a worn record button. It still worked. I found blank tapes in the same box. Labeled property of H, his initials. Mine, too. I recorded myself. Just one tape. 10 minutes. No script. No edits. I said the things I never got to say when he was alive. I told him about the job I lost, the woman I loved who left because I couldn't talk about my past, the way I still sometimes flinch when someone raises their voice. I said I was trying. Just like he did. Just like we both did in different languages. When the tape ended, I rewound it. I didn't listen to it. I just labeled it closure and tucked it into the back of the same box I found it in. It didn't fix everything. I still wake up some nights clenched with shame. I still reach for the old silence like it's armor. But I'm not sealed inside it anymore. There's a crack now event, maybe? Enough for air. Enough for light. That week, I called my mother. She didn't recognize the number. Her voice was hesitant. Then quiet. I told her I wasn't calling for explanations. Just to tell her I was okay. And that I was learning to understand things that used to hurt. She cried. So did I. We talked for 23 minutes. That's longer than we'd spoken in 10 years. Before hanging up, she said, "You sound more like yourself than I remember." And for the first time, I believed there was a self to sound like. It happened without ceremony. I was brushing my teeth one morning, 2 weeks after the call, and looked up into the mirror like I always do, same face, same hollow cheeks I inherited from him. But this time I didn't look away. For years I'd rushed through it. Quick glance. Avoid the eyes. Focus on the shaving, the hair, the angle of the jaw. Anything but the gaze. Because looking directly meant seeing what I didn't want to admit. That I had become him. And not just in the face. But this time I didn't flinch. I leaned closer. Studied the creases forming near my eyes. The way my mouth curled down when I wasn't forcing a smile. I looked tired. But not hollow. There was something behind the eyes again. Not joy, maybe not even peace, but awareness. Like I'd been sleepwalking and finally cracked one eye open. I stood there with the toothbrush hanging out of my mouth, half foam, staring at the man in the mirror. And I nodded. Not in approval. Not in defeat. Just acknowledgement. That's when I realized I'd stopped trying to outrun him. We carry people inside us, even the ones we tried to cut out. Especially those. You don't outgrow a father like mine. You absorb him, piece by piece, like splinters you learn to live with. And sometimes they fuse to you in ways that hurt less over time. I didn't want to be him. But I didn't need to erase him either. I spent that weekend cleaning. Not just tidying, purging. I pulled open drawers I hadn't touched since moving in. Old receipts. Expired prescriptions. T-shirts from places I barely remembered. I threw out boxes of junk I used to keep out of guilt, not memory. I kept only one thing from him, the badge. Not because I respected the title or the uniform, I didn't. But because it reminded me of the weight he carried. And how hard it must have been to take it off at the door every night and still try to be someone's father when no one taught him how. I mounted it in a small frame, plain wood. No plaque. Just the badge. I hung it by the door, eye level. So every time I leave the house I see it. And I remember, we're all handed something broken. A family, a memory, a silence. What we do with it, how we hold it, reshape it, or let it go, is how we build ourselves. I still talk to him sometimes. In the car. When I'm shaving. When I don't know what to do. The difference now is I hear something back. Not words. Just a feeling. Like maybe in some impossible way he's in the room with me. Not as a ghost. Not as the angry man with the badge. But as someone who also looked in the mirror once and didn't know what to say. I don't say, I forgive you. I just live in a way I think he would have wanted to if he'd had the tools. That's enough. That has to be.